Good morning. So this is our third talk of this mental health series. So it's a trilogy, and it's the final one as well. And Claire introduced the topic, and then Marion helpfully gave a talk last week on anxiety. I'd really encourage you to go back and listen to these because they're quite helpful to get our brains in gear. Certainly last week, there's loads of things that Marion was speaking about that I've sort of been putting into practice and found really helpful. So I would encourage us to go back and if you did miss the other talks. Now, as a church and a community, we're rebuilding after the COVID years. We've taken lots of hits sort of physically. We haven't had as much sort of getting out. Socially, we've missed a lot of parties, a lot of happy times. And mentally, it's been very difficult. And I wonder what you've been doing differently since lockdown, since thanks for that. Sorry. I'm on this note of the microphone. I was going to do a microphone test, and I apologise. Is anybody here called Mike? Could you put your hand up? That's the mic test anyway, but it wasn't very successful. Thank you. So is anybody doing things differently from what we've been doing before? There's a couple of things with me. One thing is I'm very, very slow, but I started running. That's one thing a couple of years ago. The other thing is we've got a next door neighbour, and they've got a 4-year-old child, and the mum said to me, she wanted the child to make the most of this the lockdown, and so she said, could I teach the child Spanish for a year? So I speak a little bit of Spanish, so I sort of say, okay. So I've given her quite a few lessons over the last year, and to be honest, she's not very good at Spanish. So after a year, she cannot even say the word please. Now that's poor for 4. Oh, that's the best joke you're going to hear today. Anyway. Sorry. I was also going to say this is one of the hazards of the internet is easy accessibility to dad jokes. So that's a warning of many of the hazards of the internet. So this morning, we're looking at this topic of toxic thoughts. I'm going to see if my pointer works. Does it work, Bradley? Try that. Is it plugged in, Bradley, the little... Hey, that's it, right, excellent. So today we're talking about toxic thoughts. And by toxic thoughts, what I mean are these recurrent negative thoughts that we often get bombarding our brains. Now, they can be, they're quite individual, and we all get an awful lot of them. They can be varied. They can be things like, I'm stupid, I'm scared, I'm going to go crazy, I'm going to fail, no one loves me, there's no future, I'm going to die, I'm sick, I'm ill, I'm worthless, nobody cares about me. And our brains can be really full of these thoughts. And they're often start quite a young age in life, in our households as we grow up, some of the experiences we have. And they can sometimes fill quite a lot of our thinking time. And no one is immune from toxic thoughts. So I'm not sure if you love him or hate him, Elon Musk, the very famous billionaire, says, I certainly have a fear of failure. The billionaire said at a conference, he recounted tough times at SpaceX's conception, financial woes threatened to destroy the company. I was so tense. When I succeeded, I didn't actually feel elation, just stress relief, that's all. So you've got an incredibly gifted person, but really locked with fear, with lots of fearful thoughts. I don't actually know this person, but it's a famous model, Bella Hadid. You may have heard of her. apparently a very famous model. She's does many famous campaigns. She's worked for many of the big design houses, red carpet events. Her life is racked with fears. I would literally black out on the red carpet, start crying and shaking if I had to do interviews. So nerve-wracking, so scary. So even people who are the most beautiful, the most gifted, still have brains with lots of sort of thoughts whirring around. Now, what I'd like you to do, this is why you've got the pens and papers below you. So there's loads of pens and papers. So if you just grab one, I would encourage us all to, there's not so many pens. If you've got your own pen, that's great. Otherwise, just grab one in front. There's plenty at the front here as well. The pens are very, very cheap, so do feel free to take them home. So when you're having your lunchtime meal saying, what happened at church today? If you forget this whole talk, you can say, yeah, but I got a free pen. So you've done all right. Oh, that doesn't work. Oh, don't say that, Sally. Don't say that. They were Amazon's finest. So what I would like you to do during this talk is whenever you get one of these toxic thoughts coming into your mind, just write it down. Okay? So whenever you get a thought, and they will be different from all of us. They might be, I'm screwed tomorrow at work, it's going to be terrible, I'm not going to sleep tonight. Whatever thought you've got, whatever sort of negative thought just pings in your mind, just write it down. For some of us, we might cover half a page. For some of us, we'll be scrabbling for the 6th page in front of you. It doesn't matter. But as I said, through the rest of this talk, just a few more minutes, just write down the thoughts that come into your head that you think, oh, that's a toxic thought. Now, what we're going to do is, we're going to have a look at a Bible reading. And this is going to be the core sort of passage that we're going to use. I'm going to read it from here. So this is from Romans chapter 12, verses 1 to 2. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And the focus of the talk really will be looking at, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our mind. So, with that thought, Paul is encouraging us that our minds can be transformed. Now, I went to Bible college a few years back, and it didn't suit me very well. I didn't do very well, and it wasn't the best experience. And I'll come back to why that was the case. But there was a few snippets that do remain with me. And one of them was, when there's a word therefore, ask why is it therefore? And so in this passage, it starts with a therefore. And what's very important is that when we're looking at transforming our minds and not being conformed by this world, Paul doesn't start with this right at the beginning of his book. Romans is one of the most expansive books in the Bible. It gives Paul's a lot of his theology, his doctrine. There's a lot on the faithfulness of God, our own human weakness and brokenness. It goes through the saving work of Jesus. It has an amazing chapter 8. If ever you need cheering up, Romans chapter 8 is one of my go-to chapters because it focuses on no condemnation. There's all about us becoming these new creatures, these new people adopted in God's family. That we're saved, that the Holy Spirit helps us. Nothing can save us from God's love. And so Paul does not come on to transformation until he's set a scene of you're going to be okay, God saved you, God loves you. And so for my thinking is a key to becoming transformed is this acknowledgement of being a loved child of God. And I think for all of us, this is a key to how we can live differently. Now, I want to look a bit about, sorry, that's being a loved child of God. That was the best loved child I could find. Right. So what I thought we would do now is look at our lives, as I said, are full of toxic thoughts, like riddled with them. And when you go through the Bible, you can see lots of people's toxic thoughts. So you can pick millions of stories, but I quite like this one. I quite like Gideon. So Gideon is in the book of Judges, so it's sort of quite early on in the Bible. And the world of Judges is just chaos. So Israel is a mess. There's no sort of civic order, civic structure. Israel is little tribes, and they keep getting robbed by their neighbors, so they keep getting all their stuff nicked, and they've forgotten God, the big God over the world who's looking after them, and they've basically gone for little gods who might help them a bit in the chaos they're in. So this is Gideon. The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites, because the Midianites were nicking all their stuff. He was basically a subsistence farmer doing his job. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon. He said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." "Pardon me, my lord," Gideon replied, "but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about? When they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up and out of Egypt?' But now the Lord's abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." The Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" "Pardon me, my lord," Gideon replied, "but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." So we got quite a nice example of what's happening with Gideon's toxic thinking. His family background is, we're basically screwed, we're farmers, we're in chaos. His thinking is, we're abandoned, no one's going to help me, God's forgotten me. So if he was writing this down, God's forgotten me, I've got no hope. And then when God asks him about something, he's the weakest, I'm the least significant, I'm the lowest, I'm the insignificant one, my family's not an important family, I'm not an important person. So he would have plenty to write Gideon about who he is. Now, all of our worlds are very, very different. So with me and my toxic thoughts, now, when I used to think that, how do people get given talks on here? And I used to think it's like the lottery where a ball comes up and your name's on it, and that's how you know what you're preaching on. But I think there is more structure to it than that. And I think the thinking was, who's got the most toxic thoughts in church could give this talk? So I'd probably be Phil then. And it had probably been correct. So I think that's a very wise decision, because I have plenty of toxic thoughts. So I grew up in a family of four boys. There's four boys. And it was not really a written rule at all, but I always had this sort of competitive nature. You know, as one of four boys, you want to win. You've got to be the fastest, the quickest, the cleverest, the whatever. So for me, to win is like really important. If I don't win, I remember the Nike campaign, it's not the winning, it's the taking apart that counts. And that's the sort of thing that appeals to me, like to win is really important. And also to be noticed, to achieve. Because how are you going to be noticed if there's four of you? Well, you've got to do something. And so lots of my toxic thoughts about being good enough, worked hard enough, achieved enough, being fruitful. Now, for all of us, our own experiences, our own worlds will give us very, very different toxic thoughts. So often if we've had difficulties in our families and people have left, then we can feel really abandoned. And that's a common toxic thought, about being abandoned, about being left, being isolated. But we've all got these toxic thoughts, and they will be individual to each one of us. And if we've got four in a family, each person will have very different ones. Now, Romans says, don't be conformed to the pattern of this world. So how are we going to take this on then? How are we going to see this transformation? How are we not going to be conformed? And I think to start with, as I said, Paul puts this transformation towards the end of his book where he's emphasizing the importance and the awareness of being a loved, adopted child of God, where all of our journeys start being loved by God, being part of his family. Now, what else can we do? Now, Paul later in Colossians and several other Bible verses, devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful. And what I want to really encourage us to do, because the problem is with toxic thoughts, is they're not very nice. If you got this thought, you're going to be abandoned, I'm going to be made homeless, I'm going to go crazy, it's a horrible thought. And so what we do is we just don't want to think about it because it's painful and not very nice. And so what we can do is we can do one of two things. We can either just try and blot them out. And the way we can do that, we can either drink a lot, eat a lot, just keep really, really busy. We can try and go on holiday, change our job, change our spouse, change our... we can do a lot of things. You can do a lot of things. The problem is you will still take that toxic thought with you. So that's a pre-warning. So if you're thinking of any of those plans, they're not brilliant. Because the thoughts, you can't run away from. You can also relax out of them. So if you're thinking, my brain is like, screwed, and all I need is 3 months in a spa. I just need. The bad news is you will still bring those toxic thoughts with you, and they will still come back when you come back anyway. So don't just try to blot them out, or just, with me, I just stay busy. I keep noise, I keep whatever. But what I want to really encourage us to do is to start looking at these thoughts and stop just batting them away, which is why I would like you to write them down. And what I would encourage you to do is keep on doing this. As over the next few days and weeks, keep a look at, I either send some dedicated time or think every time I have a toxic thought, an unhelpful thought, I'm just going to write it down and I'm going to look at it. Give it some serious time and thought. Don't waste it. If the thought is, I'm going crazy, just write it down and think about it and look at it. Because the more we look at it, it helps our brain process it. We can give it to God to help his strength to look at it. But what will happen is it will demystify it. It will stop it having the panic that we give it. The other thing that's worth doing is... you can often find patterns with our toxic thoughts. There's often the common patterns which lots of people get. One is they can be about relationships, about being on your own or being with somebody, or problems, misunderstandings in relationships. Can often be about finances. I'm going broke, I'm going bankrupt, how are we going to get through? Often about work and performance. For me, that's certainly a strong one. It can be about our health. I'm going to die, I'm sick, this means I'm in trouble. So they tend to be the commonest, but again, we all have different ones. But as I said, another point to these toxic thoughts is they are just that. They are thoughts. They are not prophecies of your life. They are not facts in history. They are not destiny set. They are thoughts. And as I said, my main sort of thrust of this talk in a way is don't waste them. Don't waste them. Don't keep batting them, but start looking at them. And often it's helpful spending several minutes at a time just keeping the thought in focus and just think about it. Think what it means. How does it affect this? How does it affect, where's this coming from? Because it will really help de-sting it. And it will also help give God an opportunity to come into it. So with sometimes toxic thoughts can make our life miserable. And for me, as I said, I was at Bible college, and for me, it was triggering all my toxic thoughts because, like, I'm a doer. I need to achieve, to do, to whatever. And so I come to Bible college. I'm not doing nothing. I'm just sitting, listening. Or, I don't like learning about stuff. I want to do stuff. And so for me, it was really hard. Especially when your brain's saying you should be doing something, you should be doing, and also like to achieve. For me, I want to be the best, I want to be top, and I was not top or the best at Bible college. So for me, it was quite hard as well. So again, toxic thoughts, they can interfere with our current happiness, our current sort of place in where we are. So the third bit, so we've got the first bit is coming back, we're a child of God, we're loved. Next is looking hard at these thoughts and keep doing it. Transformation is not an instant process. You cannot just toxic thought, boom, gone. They don't just go. You have to look at them, spend time. The next thing is, and we'll see what Gideon does and how God helps Gideon with his thoughts. So the first thing, so God chooses Gideon, rises him up to be a hero. But the first thing that happens, that same night, the Lord said to him, take the second bull from your father's herd, and the one 7 years old, and tear down your father's altar to Baal, and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Then build a proper kind of altar to the Lord your God on the top of his height. Use the wood of the Asherah pole that you cut down. Offer the second bull as a burnt offering. So Gideon took 10 servants and did as the Lord told him, but because he was afraid of his family and the townspeople, he did it rather at night rather than daytime. So what's happening here is that the first thing in the transformation of Gideon, apart from God naming him a warrior and giving him encouragement, was that he had to deal with the pattern of his world. And the pattern of his world was that his people had forgotten big God and gone for a little God to keep him safe. And God told Gideon, no, you need to chop down your father's God because you need to rely on me as your God. I'm your father. I love you. I'm going to watch out for you. So for Gideon, it was sorting out problems with his family and his family ways of thinking. Now, we've all, because toxic thoughts are a bit yucky, we all develop these defense mechanisms to try and get rid of them. As I said, we can drink, we can keep busy, we can do other stuff. We can use the internet in a not a good way, use social media, whatever. And so for Gideon, it was tackling the first stumbling block, a family way of thinking. And so I would encourage us all as well. What do we need to do to tackle the world that we've been living in and just do something different? It might be, like, for example, it's very common in families for alcohol to be an issue. And it's quite common, it often goes down a family tree. There's a genetic component to it. And so if our parents have been very heavy drinkers, it's often we become heavy drinkers. So it may be an action that we want to break this family tree, family line is, well, maybe we do need to go to an alcohol support group, Alcoholics Anonymous, or one of the various groups. It may be for somebody like me who's too driven, it may be that an important thing in life for me is to spend time in meditation and to learn Christian meditation and to learn how to reflect, how to be still and be quiet. It might be that life's been very difficult and stressful, and it might be that, well, maybe this will be a good time to take some time out to get some professional counseling or support to help me just process some of these things. So there often is an action to help our world to be transformed. So do, again, think about, as you look at your thoughts, think about, what do I need to do different? How can I change the narrative of the world I'm in? As I said, for Gideon, it was working out. I keep pressing the button. For Gideon, it was sorting out what gods was his father serving and what was unhelpful for me. So in summary, if I'm at the summary bit, sorry about this. That's fine. Yeah. So just to wrap things up, let's think about these toxic thoughts and give them some space. So that's my main encouragement today, is to not keep batting them away, because they're really, really important. We all have toxic thoughts. It does not they're not sins. We're not a bad person. We all have toxic thoughts. We're often ashamed about them. We often feel very embarrassed, which is why I'm not going to pick the first 10 people to walk up the front and just tell us exactly what are your toxic thoughts. So we're not going to do that, because they're often very personal and very private. But as I said, we do have them, and then to help tackle them, this backdrop that we're God's loved children, very special, held, cared for, adopted in his family. Let's look at them, watch and pray, keep using them as material to reflect on, to pray upon. And then what action can we take? What do we need to do differently? What do we need to do that takes us in a new place in our relationship with God? Amen. Thank you for your listening to me. And do, as I said, do take those home with you, those pieces of paper, and feel free to keep adding to them and reflect on them. And I think you'll find it really helpful.